The government is handing out cash grants to people and businesses affected by COVID-19. What's in it for you? Well, if you've lost your job since March 10, or if your business has gone out of business, or if you meet certain other criteria, you may qualify and you can apply online starting today, April 9, at wecare.gov.jm. I'm Kalilah Reynolds, and I've got the Finance Minister, Dr. Nigel Clarke, with the details. Keep watching to find out if you qualify. This program is brought to you in partnership with the Ministry of Finance.
So we're talking about the government's CARE program, which comes into effect, or applications are starting to be accepted on April 9. Tell me what it is.
So the CARE program, Kalilah, represents the government of Jamaica providing an economic cushion to those who are most vulnerable and those who would be most likely to be affected, those at the bottom of the income ladder, to, as I said before, to cushion the economic impact of the COVID pandemic. And we have programs for individuals as well as programs for businesses within the CARE umbrella.
So there are 9 different components of the CARE program. Let's go through them one by one because it's quite a bit. So let's start with the Set Cash program.
The Set Cash program is a program, it's called Supporting Employees with Transfers of Cash. And the Set Cash program is for individuals who were formerly employed and who lost their employment since the 10th of March, became unemployed after the 10th of March or laid off. And those persons can apply. They need their name, their TRN, the name of their previous employer. And after their employer verifies their employment status, that they indeed were terminated or laid off, then they would receive a transfer of $9,000 a fortnight for the next 3 months. That totals about $54,000. And this is targeted at the many men and women who work on the factory floor, who work in the warehouse, who work on the vans, who work in hotels as bartenders or waitresses, or people who tend to the rooms, or landscapers, etc., who find themselves without employment suddenly as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic.
So is this regardless of what industry you work in?
Yeah, the Set Cash is regardless of what industry you work in, yes.
Okay, let's move to the other one. Let's go to General Grants.
The General Grant now is targeted at those who are self-employed but work in industries that have been directly affected. For example, barbers and hairdressers, cosmetologists, and those who work on personal beauty, who have had their livelihoods completely disrupted as a result of COVID-19. Those who have PPV licensees, taxis and bus operators, who have no passengers to take because everybody's at home. For the Juta and the Maxi and the JCAL operators, who also have no tourists to take because there are no tourists coming to Jamaica. The craft vendors, who have 0 persons to sell their crafts at the craft markets. The market vendors, who will be displaced because congregating in market spaces is not healthy. For those persons, and of course the bars, people who have bars, and we have asked bars to be shut. For those persons, we have a one-off grant ranging between $25,000 and $40,000 once they can be verified by the parish council, in the case of those who have to register with the parish council, and by the transport authority for the taxi and the bus operators, and by TPDCO for the Juta, the JCAL, the Maxi, and the craft vendors. And again, they apply online by going to www.wecare.gov.jm and put in the information, including TRN. It's verified and the payment is made to their bank account.
And this one is specific to those categories that you listed: barbers, hairdressers, cosmetologists, taxis, bus, market, or are there others that can qualify too?
This is specific to those areas, to those occupational groups that were hit hard and hit fast. We're working to include persons in the entertainment space, but we have to, we want to be very specific in how we define that. But we're working with Minister Grange and her ministry about persons who are registered there who can also benefit under the general grant. The idea of the general grant, Kalilah, is the occupational groups that are most affected. You know, everyone is affected to some extent. You're affected, you know, I'm affected, but we want to go out, you know, those who are most affected, you know, who have had their revenue base completely eroded, which is not a nice position to be in.
Yeah, entertainment is definitely one of those that have been greatly affected. Disc jockeys, nightlife in general has come to a halt.
Yes, yes, that is true. That is correct.
So moving on to the next category, we have the compassionate grants.
Right, so the compassionate grant now, you know, we expect that to be one of the larger sort of in terms of applications, because that is open to persons who have been unemployed for some time, persons who are informally employed, persons who might be elderly, or students over the age of 18 who find themselves in a position of need. This is a one-off transfer of $10,000. They would just have to sign up online with their TRN and their address, their mobile phone number. We would verify that they're not on any employment database, and then a transfer would be made to their bank account. And to the extent that they don't have a bank account, and they can pick up the payment at a remittance company, presenting an ID that verifies that they are indeed the holder of that TRN. So this, you know, we see as a departure from where we have been in Jamaica, where, you know, crises and economic shocks, we're responding with direct transfers to, you know, targeted way to persons who are likely to be affected. And, you know, when something like this happens, those who are on irregular incomes and small incomes or no income at all, shocks like these have a pervasive impact on them. And, you know, we want to maintain the social fabric of the society, and of course, to ensure that some amount of spending power is still within the reach of these categories of Jamaicans.
I notice you've been saying that all the applications are being done online. And of course, I'm sure that's to encourage the social distancing. You don't want people lining up anywhere. But what about people who don't have access to internet?
Well, you know, it is accessible by mobile phone, not just by computer. And mobile phone penetration in Jamaica is well over 100%, maybe 120%. And the vast majority of mobile phones, you know, have this kind of access. And if you don't own one, you definitely know someone who has a mobile phone. So the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. It keeps the process very simple, very efficient. Within a minute or two, your application would be in, no more than that. And once you have all of your information up front, and from the comfort and the privacy of your house, for your home, for where you reside, you can fill out this application and have it processed automatically with the funds just turning up in your bank account. Or in the case of the compassionate grant, the option is there for the funds to turn up at a remittance company on your behalf.
Okay, so let's look at the PATH grants. Those have been increased?
Yes, so for the PATH grants, we're going to be transferring $1.1 billion to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security for them to increase the number of PATH payments during this period. Normally, PATH beneficiaries would receive a payment in April and another one in June. We're adding a COVID-19 PATH payment for the month of May, so that over this 3-month period, persons on PATH will receive 3 payments instead of 2, which is an increase of 50% over what they would normally be in receipt of.
Those payments are how much? What's the dollar amount?
Well, the dollar amounts varies because there are various different PATH programs. There may be 10 or 12 categories of PATH payments. So what we have just said to the ministry, you know, what's the total amount that's paid in one payment, and we have provided 3 of those instead of 2.
And the final one for individuals is the student loan relief. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So the student loan relief, you know, targets a big population of persons who have student loans, whether or not they earn above 1.5 or below 1.5. Once they have a student loan, what we've said is repayments on that loan will be suspended, or the need for repayment will be suspended. Payments of principal and interest deferred for the months of April, May, and June. So no payments are necessary on student loans until July.
Okay, let's come to the business benefits now,
Yeah.
starting with Best Cash.
Right. So we have 3 programs for businesses. 2 of them are focused on the tourism sector, and the third one is focused on small business. And again, we're going after, or we're targeting sectors that are affected, and then in the broader space, the category of business that's likely to be affected or affected most. The Best Cash is a program for tourism employers or companies that operate in the tourism sector. We are encouraging them to keep employees on their payroll, even if they're not coming to work. And what we're saying to them is, for every employee that you keep on your payroll, we will transfer to you $9,000 per fortnight, or $54,000 over the next 3 months, for every employee who makes less than $1.5 million. So again, that is the bartenders, the waitresses, the people who tend to rooms, and so forth. We're saying keep them on your payroll, keep in touch with them, and we will support you to this amount. And the reason for this, Kalilah, is that we want to keep companies in that sector connected to their employees. If they're connected to their employees, it gives us the best chance for a very sharp recovery once the pandemic clears and travel resumes, normal or semi-normal patterns. If people are scrambling to get employees at that stage, the extra week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks that it might take will mean that another country, would get the business. And we want to be in a position that we can get the business by keeping employees and employers connected. So we're supporting them in that way. We have another program for tourism, which is a more discretionary program, where we are putting up $1.2 billion for grants to companies that operate in the tourist sector. More than likely, the medium-sized companies, the smaller companies who can apply, they'd have to submit information on their business, on their cash flow projections, on the recovery plan, and they would then be a committee, a multidisciplinary committee, a multi-stakeholder committee, would make a decision about a grant in their favor. And this could be, a larger number. And again, it's for, big companies or medium-sized companies. Think of a small hotel or a small guest house that might need a grant to enable to tide them over this 3 months period and put them in a position to recover. Again, we're trying to protect the productive capacity. We don't want it to disappear. Yeah.
Is there any limit on the amount that one can apply for under that program?
Yes, the grants will be limited. We have not finalized what it is. We're in discussions with stakeholders, but that will be made public once we finalize. But the idea is for us to be able to provide grants to several hundred operators in the tourism space.
Do Airbnb operators qualify under either of these tourism programs?
As long if they're registered with TPDCO, then yes.
Okay.
Right? So the Tourism Product Development Company, if they're registered with that entity, that government entity, then yes, they would qualify.
The last one for businesses I see is a small business grant. So how's that different?
Right. So the small business grant now is open to small businesses in any sector. As long as your business has had average sales for the past 3 years of $50 million or less, which puts you on the small end of the spectrum in Jamaica, then you would be entitled, and you've paid taxes in the 2019 financial year, and a payroll return evidence in that somebody's employed, which could be the owner, then you'd be eligible for a small business grant of $100,000. That would, again, would be paid to your bank account. And there, what we're saying there is that an economic shock of this nature affects everyone. The smaller your business is, the smaller the revenue base that you have, and there are about 6,000 businesses with revenues under 15 million. The smaller your revenue base is the less able you are to cushion a shock. Companies that are larger, that have been around for longer, have different types of support, access to credit, lines of credit, and so forth. we have had a virtual explosion of small business and small entrepreneurial activity over the past few years. And we want to preserve that so that we still have it after this pandemic has passed. And therefore, the desire to step in and to say to those tiny, tiny, tiny businesses, sales of $2 million, $5 million, $7 million, in terms of their revenues, which is, as you know, a very different number from profit, that we would provide them with a one-off grant to help with expenses that they will incur during this period when their revenues are probably affected to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Now, how long can the government sustain a program like this? How long are you planning for?
Well, this program, many of the grants in the program are one-off. So you get it one time. The set cash and the best cash are paid monthly for the next 3 months. So, we see this program as a 3-month program where the one-off payments can happen anytime in that 3-month period. And the two programs, the set cash and the best cash that have monthly payments, those would come to an end in June.
What happens if this pandemic affects Jamaica longer than the 3 months past June?
We cross that bridge when we come to it. The good news is that the government of Jamaica has, in an unprecedented fashion, in a way that hasn't happened before, we are responding with in a direct way, direct transfers to targeted individuals and targeted businesses. And that hasn't really happened before. So, we're just focused on a successful execution of this. And, as things unfold, we make adjustments as, this crisis unfolds.
I imagine that's what the reserves are there for too. We have an unprecedented amount of international reserves, if it would come to that eventually.
Yeah, well, the reserves are on the monetary side, right? That's on the balance of payments side. That's not fiscal stuff. So the reserves, they're to the extent that there are pressures on in terms of foreign exchange, and foreign exchange is necessary, and supply is not as buoyant or as robust as has been in the past because tourism, has ground to a halt and remittances have slowed down due to unemployment in the United States. Then our reserves in the central bank are there to be used to deal with the drop in supply of foreign exchange.
Over the next few months, we are going to see quite a reduction in tax collections because people aren't spending as much. So the GCT has been cut from 16.5 to 15%. And in addition to that, the government is not going to be collecting as much revenue from GCT, from SCT, other sources, whatever consumer sources there are, because economic activity has slowed down so much. How are we going to manage, Minister?
Right. So you're absolutely correct that revenues for the 2021 year will be lower than we would like, and certainly lower than last year because of the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The good news is that Jamaica has quite a few options. We have some amount of fiscal cushion, and at the appropriate time, we will update the country as to exactly what we will do going forward. But yes, we can fully expect that revenues, with no visitors coming to Jamaica, we had 4 million visitors last year, and we'll have no visitor certainly for the first 3 months of this year, and probably longer, maybe. So that will certainly have a knock-on effect and affect revenues that come to the government.
Do you have a projection as yet as to how much revenue is likely to be lost directly to the government's coffers?
No. We are working with different scenarios. So the best way to prepare for a situation like this is to, there's one, one can always project, but one should also just work with a scenario. What if revenues are X% down? What if they're 2X%? What if they're 3X or 4X? What would you do? So we have all of those scenarios sort of worked out in terms of what our likely response will be, if depending on how the scenarios evolve. Things have been moving extremely rapidly. Certainly the measures that governments around the world have taken in response to this pandemic have been updated on a regular basis and have gotten more and more serious with more and more consequences for economic activity around the world and also here in Jamaica. So we are approaching it from the point of view of making sure that whatever scenario emerges, we are in a position to respond. And that's where we find ourselves as at today.
I have a few questions from Twitter. Mark Greenswood on Twitter says, can you please ask the minister what sort of protection is put in place for elderly persons who don't have families to look after them and no NIS or any form of pension to benefit from? What provisions are in place and how, if any, can they access such?
So elderly
compassionate grant.
Yes, so elderly persons can apply for a compassionate grant. Just have their TRN ready, go online, name, address, mobile phone number. It would take less than a minute. Get a confirmation number, and by the end of the month or thereafter, shortly thereafter, they'll get that transfer in their bank account.
Can you apply on behalf of someone else, or they have to do it themselves?
Well, we need to have a TRN. The TRN has to match the date of birth. The name on the bank account has to match the name of the person with the TRN. And to the extent that this is going to a remittance company, the person, collecting has to be the person in whose name, whose TRN the transfer has been made. So we have to have checks and balances to ensure that the persons who are deserving of it are the persons who receive it. And in this case, we can, from the TRN, we can tell whether somebody is on the formal employment database or not.
But what's the expected turnaround time between application? The expected turnaround time between the time I apply and I get my money?
Okay, so applications are going to open on the 9th of April, and the first set of payments people will be in receipt of them by the end of the month. And for others, it might be a few days, after the end of the month, because some validation has to happen. So it'll be fairly quick.
Okay, all right. Another one from Twitter, Bigger Boss Media says, regarding the Best Cash program, are payments being made to businesses supposed to be passed on to the employees they keep, or is that for the businesses to decide?
Well, we are only passing it on to the business if they keep employees. Okay, so they'd apply for it. They would file their payroll returns, which is due the 15th of the month. We would see the payroll returns and see the number of people on the payroll, and the number of people on the payroll would determine the amount that they receive at the end of the month.
All right, thanks, Minister. Anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, just to say that, you access these grants by going on to wecare.gov.jm, and that, this is the government stepping up and providing assistance at this very unusual and uncertain time. The government can't do it all by itself, and so we need all the citizens of Jamaica to, in this time, see ourselves as our brothers and our sisters keepers, and those who are able to assist others in need. I would just encourage everyone to do that, to support each other, to rally around each other. And if we continue to do that, then with God's help, we'll certainly get out of this, and the sun, will shine again.
All right. Thanks again, Minister. All the best.
Thank you, Kalilah. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's what's in it for you, brought to you in partnership with the Ministry of Finance. Remember, apply online at wecare.gov.jm. I'm Kalilah Reynolds. Stay safe, guys. This program is brought to you in partnership with the Ministry of Finance.